do when you've taken the wrong direction, your compass is faulty, and you've run out of fuel on the high seas in a violent storm? That's how one of V. Sudarshan's essays begins. It was enough to send me looking for my BP medication. And this session on true crime is going to leave you very suspicious of the person sitting next to you, unless you already are. Can I welcome the speakers for this session on stage, please?
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces in the audience. And nice to be back at the Lit Fest. Sudarshan and I are from the same profession. We're both journalists who've, he of course is far more interested in crime and criminology. I don't know why that is a recurring theme now. I mean, we start off with Sacred Games, and now we have Sudarshan doing 2 books, not one, on crime, Dead End and Tuticorin. So he's an author already. He's written 4 books before this, and these 2 have been written quite quickly. I'm amazed at how quickly you finished them. You mentioned that in your book as well. So we'll start with Dead End, Sudarshan, because Sudarshan was also the former editor of the New Indian Express. You must bring that in. And worked for the Hindu for a very long time. I knew him when he was in Outlook magazine, and actually did a fabulous story on tracking the Indians who got kidnapped in Iraq during the Iraq War. Which was quite interesting, tracking them down and actually doing interviews with them when they were released. But this crime wave, I think the fact that, editors like you are interested in crime came as quite a revelation to me. Because when I did the page 3 for crime, I would always sort of say, okay, yes, one more person's been murdered, yes. But you actually gone in deeply into this one crime, which happened right here, folks, in Bangalore in 1987, and involved, a man who really should not have been murdered. So, Sudarshan, what actually fascinated you about this? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then please just give us an insight into why you picked this crime.
Yeah, morning. I'm happy to be in Bangalore, and I want to tell you straight away that both Neena and I spent a lot of time covering the Ministry of External Affairs, which is very, very far removed from anything to do with crime. And if there's any criminal activity going on there, it is well hidden. It'll come out much after we are gone. And the only crime thing that I wrote about the Ministry of External Affairs was a kidnapping in Iraq in 2004. Where ransom was paid and the government of India negotiated secretly for 42 days. And it's called Anatomy of an Abduction. And I've always been interested in crime. And it just so happened that in journalism, I was doing more foreign affairs than crime. Crime is where usually reporters start out in the profession. And usually the best people in reporting are assigned to crime because they have a way of ferreting out the news. They have a way of adding detail and making everything 300 words. But I became interested in Dead End after I finished from the
title
Hindu.
of the book it's no dead end. It's a recurring theme in our lives.
Absolutely. So Dead End happened 35 years ago, 37 years ago, but if you look around you, it is happening pretty much even now. So nothing has changed really in these intervening years. Names have changed, places have changed, people have changed, but the system remains the same. And I think I got involved in Dead End because it allowed me to explore the underbelly of the system. Now when you read a paper, you just read the headlines. You just read the story and then you forget about it, it's gone. So once a crime is committed, for example, it makes a headline. Like right now, that person who chopped up somebody into 35 pieces.
Shraddha Walker.
Absolutely. And I think in our days, it was the Tandoori murder case. So these things keep happening, and it keeps popping up into the headline. But from the time a crime is committed to the time a judgment is pronounced on the incident or the crime or whatever act was done is a hell of a long time. For example, this story broke when I joined the profession. I joined the profession in 85. This story broke in 87. It broke in Bangalore, and it was on page 1 because it involved a home minister. A lawyer from Kerala named the home minister as having attacked him in the police station, and he feared for his life. And 2 days later, his body turns up in Omalur, which is in Salem, about 5-6 hours drive from here, I think, by road, by the railway tracks. And then, fortunately, he had sent off a telegram to the Chief Minister, to the Chief Justice of India, to the Home Minister, and to a whole lot of other people. And then he had also gone to the press. And so, therefore, there was an immediate connect that this guy had already predicted that he was going to be, he feared for his life. And then there was a protest in Bangalore. For 3 days, courts did not function. And then a CBI inquiry was ordered. So what happens, what is interesting about it is that there were 3 investigations done by 3 different agencies on this murder. And then the CBI also comes in, and the CBI is about to close this case as a case of suicide, that this guy probably jumped off the Quilon Express on the way to Kerala. And when there is, this is a very, very quirky happenstance of fate, when the superintending officer changes, and when the new guy comes, he appoints another person to go through all the record files with regard to this case to find out where this case is and give him a status report and his views on what he thinks of the case. And so this happened to be Mr. Raghuttaman, Kuppuswamy Raghuttaman.
So before you get to Raghuttaman, I just want you to tell the audience on why you fixated on a crime of this sort, which happened 35 years ago. Was it because to my mind, when I read the book, I felt that it also shows you, at that time in 87, that nexus between businessmen who acquired land in a dodgy way or not, and the connection that they had to politicians who saw education as a way of making money, and the blessings that they had from cops who looked the other way, lawyers who looked the other way, didn't exist. It just started. It didn't exist 35 years ago. Now, of course, it's a
Endemic.
It's a profession. Everyone accepts that ministers do this and so on and so forth. So the involvement of such a senior minister, the education minister, he was education minister, wasn't he?
He was the minister for cooperation, and then he becomes the home minister.
Yeah, and then he became the home minister.
Which is when it becomes sinister, that he controls the police as well.
Yes, because the thing is, Ramakrishna Hegde always promised a completely different government. That's why people loved him. So could you tell us how that connection, why it attracted you in the first place, and secondly, how I think that has stayed on. It's become bigger and bigger until now it consumes us all. Every single educational institution now there's a question mark over.
Absolutely. At a very basic level, there are 2-3 reasons why I chose to write this book. One, I was interested in writing something in crime. So I was interested in writing a murder story. And this is a real murder story, so that's point number 1. And point number 2, there was an emotional connect with the story because the material came to me through a curious set of circumstance after I had no job. I had my retirement to plan forward, and this came to me, and the entire set of documents came to me, and the investigator was also alive. So what happens, in a sense, it was, to use a trite phrase, it was heaven sent. And secondly, and thirdly, the elements in the story are very compelling, and the story itself is very dark. It is, and that kind of absorbed me. And this is something that I want to tell, if you give me a minute. I really liked a movie called Chinatown, Roman Polanski's movie. I don't know how many of you may have seen it, but in that, a private detective is ultimately thrown out of the scene by his own colleagues saying, "Go home, Jake." Jack Nicholson is Jake. He's a private investigator. and the guy says, "Go home, Jake. This is Chinatown." And I wanted to recreate uh, that moment, that darkness, in the end of this book. And so all these things kind of propel me. And first, most important, the fourth reason is that the story is universal. The story is universal in the sense that it could happen anywhere. It is happening all over the place. And
Sudarshan, it was also very factual, in the sense there's nobody who can turn around and say that the minister was involved was not Jalapa. I mean, Jalapa had a reputation, and at that time, I still remember when we were young reporters, you saw him as a beast, basically. And that too, he came to, so tell us a little bit about Raghotaman. He and I, Sudarshan and I also have a link about Raghotaman.
Yeah.
Because Raghotaman was the investigating officer for the Rajiv Gandhi murder case, assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, which I was unfortunately witness to. And he was the main, the main man behind this, the actual facts of this case, which I think is amazing, because he seems to have been, the chapter on Raghotaman is worth reading. I loved it. And the chapter on Jalapa visiting Raghotaman, I think was even more fascinating. If you could tell the audience about that, that would be really fabulous.
Yeah, I'll talk about the connection first. If I were to put it in a really macabre way, Neena was close enough to Rajiv Gandhi in his dying moments to have his blood all over her dress. She was at the assassination spot. And this is where Raghotaman comes in. He comes in as the chief investigator for the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. And Neena has written a book about it. So, in a sense, Raghotaman was both our sources. And of course, her canvas is far bigger, and it involves the Prime Minister. My canvas is very specific, very detailed, and it sticks to the court facts and the facts established in the court, as well as the documents that are available. I didn't stray. It's a very short book. It's only less than 200 pages. And
it's a great read.
Yeah, I can say that too, but I won't. Yeah, so what was the question again?
Well, the question basically was about Jalapa. If we could actually tell us, because this whole business about a minister coming to visit Raghotaman was a pressure tactic that like no other. I mean, if he arrived, while Raghotaman is having a shower, and then when Raghotaman loses his temper and throws him out of the house, and then he notices a suitcase which is left behind by the chair. I mean, did those things actually happen to other people is what I was concerned. But tell them about Jalapa and Raghotaman, the fact that Jalapa told him specifically to back off in as polite a manner as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Jalapa needed to come back into politics in a big way. For that, he needed to have a clean chit. And the court gives him a clean chit. And in the narrative, Jalapa comes across as someone you will meet in the movies. And the scenes that you will read in the book, you will think are there in the movies. It cannot happen in real life. But it happened in real life. I know because the investigator told me. And the court also establishes this. And he's a archetypal politician who is a businessman, and his money-making zeal makes him a villain in some respects. And also it happens at a time when educational institutions bloom in Karnataka in the late 80s, especially medical colleges, engineering colleges, and other colleges. And it was just building up, and a hell of a lot of students came from other states, from Kerala. So this was actually a battle between two businessmen, an educational entrepreneur and a politician who is also an entrepreneur. And Rashid Poorman gets caught in it.
The lawyer.
He's a lawyer from Pathanamthitta, and he comes to Bangalore to get his brother a seat in an engineering college. And one more thing, he's killed on his wedding anniversary, his 10th wedding anniversary. So there are lots of tragic elements and really emotional underpinning to this is pretty strong.
But Sudarshan, why is it that he paid the price? I mean, the owner, the man who actually dealt with the politicians and got the land allocated to him was a Sadashivan, who was a businessman from Kerala. Now, why is it that the lawyer, Rashid, who comes to get his brother, forgot the brother's name, a seat in the actual college, why does he pay the price and get killed? I mean, that description of yours really is quite. I mean, you read about murders and so on, but the graphic description of how this poor Rashid was actually killed and how the witness actually talks about it, I think that is quite unnerving.
It is.
And why is it that Rashid was killed? I would like to know.
Right. About the scene where he is killed, actually I rewrote it and it was toned down also till it got a PG rating from my publishers. Otherwise it was far more gory and graphic. And now why Rashid died? Simply, number one, between the minister and the businessman was very high. I mean, if the minister could have got a chance to bump off the businessman, he would have. But the businessman took several anticipatory bails in the course of this battle with the minister, and he was always in hiding. In fact, our man Rashid meets him while he's in hiding. So there was a lot of hostility and animosity between the two. And what Rashid did was to interpolate into this in such a manner as to become a real pain by naming the minister. Before, if he had not named the minister, I am convinced that he would have got away with his life. Because in a previous scene, he is beaten black and blue in the police station which is round the corner, High Grounds police station on Sankey Road. And he's detained there for a day and he's beaten, 3 of his teeth come loose. And he would have gotten away with it had he not, after that, named the minister as being the cause of his ultimate death. He predicted it, he says he fears for his life, and then he loses his life. If he had not named the minister, I think he would have gotten away with it. But I think it also shows a certain level of hubris among politicians that, who are these guys? I mean, these guys are, as they say in Hindi, chiller people, small change. I mean, very, very dispensable. And that's how I think fate was cruel to him. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Do you think that apart from everything else, I think what comes through in your book is the level of corruption in the police as well? I mean, you expect politicians, for them, it's a side, I mean, making money is part and parcel of who they are. You and I are in grave danger, by the way. You've named Jalapa and so have I. We don't know what is, guys are going to say. No, but seriously, I mean, the level of corruption in the police force that you've sort of put, do you think that still persists?
If anything, if you read the headlines, it's gotten much worse. It has gotten much worse. I don't have to name the stories that you read in the... how can a guy from Bangalore, even without a charge sheet, be arrested in Delhi, as happened in Zubair? I mean, it's ridiculous, not even an FIR. And what was the thing that somebody feared, was offended? That's why he was arrested. I mean, things have gotten much worse. And so far as corruption is concerned, I don't think if you look at a higher level, the police are just doing what they are told to do, rather than doing their job. Because they've been ordered to do something, they're doing it. In this case, there are 18 accused. 6 of them are policemen. And most of the other people are, pimps, rowdies, and other third-rate characters. And I do believe that the system still exists. What this book offers is a glimpse of what happens inside the system, what happens behind the headlines, what happens in real life. And I think it is still endemic. It's, in fact, much worse from what I hear.
And Raghuttaman himself seems to have been incorruptible. I mean, he was really one of the finest officers. Unfortunately, he passed away in May this year. But your second book, now if we can go to your second book, which is Tutkuran, which is also very I mean, the Bangalore book, I mean, Dead End is about what happens in Majestic and High Grounds police stations, so it's a very little too close for comfort. Your book, Tuticorin, which is a series of stories about crimes conducted in what Sudarshan calls the crime capital of Tamil Nadu. And another lovely line which says Malgudi, where murder meets Malgudi, which I thought was quite funny. But that's also a collection of stories on crime. Again, courtesy a very senior police officer who seems to have gone against the system. I mean, he nearly got thrown out of the academy when he was training as a police officer, and yet fought the system and fought his way back into the system and seems to have become a very popular officer. But he was also a northerner. I mean, he was a North Indian who didn't really speak Tamil, and yet he served in Toothukudi and learned the language, learned the way of the people. I mean, could you tell us something about, and what do you have these links with officers like these?
Yeah, the second book came organically out of the first book. And the person who put me on to Raghuttaman was a DGP of police called Anup Jaiswal, who happens to be the subject matter of the second book. This deals with stories in the district where, most of India lives in the districts. And what happens there, what kind of justice do they get, what kind of events happen there. So there are massacres, mass murders, rapes, and there's also a whole lot of other heartwarming stories in this. And I think it gives you a glimpse into what happens in the countryside. And as a journalist, I thought it's a great opportunity to shine a torch over there.
So 2 policemen, 2 books. What's next?
I am a little superstitious about life, so I will know it more when I get to know it more. Let's keep it that way. But but I'm a novice in this criminal business, and I hope to continue in this path till I become a hardened criminal.
Oh my God. So we'll throw the forum open to questions. Anybody?
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. So I had a question about, and I loved your talk, by the way. But I had a question about how there are certain books that are coming out as kind of say a response to true crime incidents that have happened earlier. So, for instance, there are books that may be coming out which are against, like Jack the Ripper, from the victim's point of view. So, how do we trade that fine line? How would you say you trade that fine line between writing a crime from the perspective of the criminal and from the perspective of the victim? Then.
That's an interesting question.
Good question.
It's an interesting question. Now, if you read the criminal from the non-criminal, and that's the first point. And the second point is I haven't read too many of other crime books or the books that you mentioned. And what I'm trying to do is populate the world with a little bit of my own view. So I don't know what's going on in the other aspects. Although I'm a big fan of crime writing in the olden days. Truman Capote was a big hero of mine, In Cold Blood. And so all those are in my mind, not the new ones.
And I wanted to know from like the perspective of a journalist, when you're writing about true crime, you're doing a sort of expose or you're showing a side to a story that could get you in trouble. So how do you, in a way, like save yourself when you're doing these sort of writings?
Actually, the job of a journalist is to get the others into trouble without you getting into trouble. Whatever I have written about, I'm lucky that all this is all cold facts, established many, many years ago. And many people in Bangalore, anybody who is over 50, probably knows this story. So my challenge was to make it interesting and readable to both new readers and to the people who lived through it in the headlines. And to answer your question, you have to put the others in the mat and make sure that you don't get onto it as a journalist. Yeah.
Thank you so
Thanks a lot.
much.